Okay, take it away, Simon.
Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you for attending this joint webinar between the Royal College of GPs and Wesleyan Financial Services. And the topic this evening is planning for your retirement, you and your practice. So hopefully over the next hour and a half, we'll be able to give you some excellent insight and information to help you with your thoughts and your plans around retiring. On to the next slide, please, Alice. So first of all, who are we? For those of you who don't know the Wesleyan, we're a mutual organisation. We've been around for just over 180 years. We've got a nationwide coverage of financial consultants who specialise in the needs of GPs, practices, PCNs, health boards, etc., with all the nations, in fact, and their families and their financial planning needs. We have an advisory board whose job is to help guide us and inform us of what are the key issues and challenges that you face as GPs, and is made up of eminent members of your profession. We have an award-winning investments team, and a couple of things that I'm really proud of. First of all is that our charitable side of things, have donated over £1 million over the last 18 months to charities and community groups, particularly dealing with the impact of COVID and supporting those who have struggled the most. What we're also very proud of is we've just renewed this year for the second year our relationship with the Royal College of GPs. And what we look to do through work like this is help educate and inform, provide special offers through the RCGP Plus, and support you in your journey through career and financial planning. This is the first of a series of 4 webinars. The next ones, I think it's women in general practice. We've then got one on PCNs and then on early years. So please do look out for information of that over the next 6 months. There will be more of this. Okay, so let me do some introductions for us. My name's Simon Appleyard. I'm a regional manager for Wesleyan Financial Services, and I've worked with the financial planning needs of GPs and those working in primary care for over 13 years now. I'm also one of the subject matter experts for the Wesleyan to help ensure that our company strategy is focused on the right challenges and helping with the right challenges that GPs and their practices face. My day job, however, involves working with my team of specialist financial consultants, helping clients build robust plans for their financial goals, not least of which is retirement. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Anita Campbell. Anita is a retired GP from Sheffield who pursued a portfolio career even and avoided a cliff edge retirement. During a varied career, she worked as a partner, a GP trainer, PCT professional executive chair, GMC team leader, GP with specialist interest in rheumatology, GP appraiser, coach and mentor. Her retirement was planned for when she was 58, but in the event stopped clinical practice at 61 and has continued to work in roles which don't involve a license to practice in England since. In the last few years, after taking the NHS pension, there's been a mixture of voluntary and paid roles as an appraiser, mentor and coach, working with people such as Age UK, and having an administrative role in her local church. Now, for 3 years, she has been the RCGP Later Career and Retired Members Lead, that's LCARM, and worked with the National Committee of Leads, a committee that came into prominence during the pandemic as retired GPs came back to help in various clinical and non-clinical roles. Welcome, Anita, and if I could ask you just to give us a quick minute on your perspective about this evening's topic.
Thank you very much, Simon. Really pleased to be here representing LCARM. So those of you that don't know, have not come across LCARM before, it just stands for Later Career and Retired Members, and it's a network across all 4 nations, and it's a resource for you. And people sort of say, well, aren't I too young for this? Well, no, actually, the fact that you're here today, the fact that you're considering planning for retirement means that this network probably does have something for you. So we're interested in keeping healthy in the lead up to retirement, through retirement, and well into retirement. And I guess that we sort of think about things, and I hope to contribute to this, perhaps some of the softer aspects to this webinar. I'm going to be thinking about relationships, how that relates to the financial aspects, how to maintain an intellectual challenge through retirement, how to maintain your physical health, your mental health, and your financial health. Obviously, there's experts here tonight. But I would stress that I think Michelle is going to put up on the chat the link to the LCARM landing page of the Royal College of General Practitioners website. And that is a wealth of resources for you if you're starting to plan retirement. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Anita. Next, can I introduce Dr. Chris Mason, a GP principal and trainer in Pudsey, Leeds, for 30 years, retiring from partnership in April 2020. As an Army Reserve medical officer, retiring a couple of years early from the NHS freed him up to do some Army planning and GP jobs in the COVID-19 world, including 4 months in Cyprus over the winter with the United Nations. And I think over the winter is a good time to be working in Cyprus. Married to a GP who retired from the NHS at the same time as him. Welcome, Chris. Again, please, a minute on your perspective on the topic.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I think I would call myself peri-retired at the moment. That was always part of the plan to do these other things. And I think, in truth, the reality is the planning bit is the most important aspect that I'd like to bring to this, really, particularly as a partner. And inevitably, by the time you reach retirement age, usually a fairly crucial member of the management of your practice. And you know, it's all about trying to extricate yourself from that and plan to ensure that you get the systems in place, make sure you're not irreplaceable. So it's all about the planning to get out of the practice, which I think really quite successfully managed to do with some really good people to leave to carry things on. I think it's also about knowing exactly what you want from retirement, you know, what is enough for your needs, and the best way to try and crystallize that sort of information is to take advice. And that's something obviously I suspect we're going to keep coming back to on this, really, that you know, you're planning to get off that treadmill. What do you really want to do in retirement? None of us know what the future holds. My decision making was about trying to get off that treadmill, that 30 years of work in Pudsey, whilst I was still fit, able, active, etc. Do some other things, but you know, ensure that you've planned for the future in a way that isn't just thinking I need more and more and more. It's all about really, what do you actually really truly need? And I think that will be my main focus here. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. Also, next we have Dr. Mark Gaffney. Mark is a full-time GP and is the clinical director for Victoria PCN and chairman of the new Victoria Medical Centre, responsible for the building of a 30,000 patient practice and development and merger of 4 practices to form the VMC. Features a complete redesign of general practice and implementing advanced information technology in a new digital first branch surgery in the main shopping centre, and also a separate vaccination centre. During his tenure as a GP, he has undertaken many concomitant tasks. I knew I was going to trip over that word. He's also he was a member of the South East Clinical Senate Executive GP on the Professional Executive Committee of the East Sussex Downs and Weald PCT, Vice Chairman of the PCT Transitional Clinical Executive, a member of the LMC, and he was a founder and managing director of an independent NHS provider organisation. Due to pension changes, he undertook 24-hour retirement and then returned to general practice. Good evening, Mark, and again, please, a minute on your perspective on this evening's topic.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Because I can't see my picture on that one, but
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Yes, you can. I'll just carry on talking. Right, thank you. Yes, my real perspective was I was kind of forced to retire by the lifetime allowance and the changes that came along. So I took the 24-hour retirement. I didn't have any real intention of retiring at that time. There was a lot of very big projects I was right in the middle of. But for financial reasons and taking advice from the Wesleyan in particular, I realized that I had to jump ship on the pension scheme very, very quickly. Yeah, it's saved me a lot of money. And of course, there are other aspects if you're carrying on working, but have retired, like the superannuation pay and so on. So it is financially a good option if anyone wants to go down that road. Personally, my main reason for going down is because we had so many things going on that I was involved with that I had to carry on doing. And we've now succeeded with that, with the new surgeries and the PCNs and everything else. So we've got one of the most successful PCNs. It's really great. But my perspectives on retirement were more forced retirement and 24 hours. And hence I'm still here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, everybody. Well, sorry, last but not least, sorry, Alice, I shouldn't have said that. Please go back a slide. Can I introduce Julia Blaiston? Sorry, my bad. One of our specialist financial consultants. Julia's first job in financial services was working with AIG Home Services in 2002 and has since worked in a variety of roles within the industry. After joining Wesleyan in 2011 and completing her diploma in financial advice, Julia has made a difference to the businesses and lives of her GP clients in the Kent, Sussex and Surrey areas. Julia, your perspective on this evening's topic.
Oh, it's very interesting listening to Chris and Mark in terms of their experience of retirement, and what it really brings home is that it's different for everybody. And my job is really to, first of all, absolutely understand what it is that my clients are looking to achieve. Pensions can get very technical. Clients are extremely busy. And I think tonight we'll give some insight and demystify a little bit around the various different sections of the pension. I'm going to try not to be technical here and really just more relate it to what I do every day, which is really hold the hands of my clients and take them through that journey of retirement. And it will look different for everybody. It's very much an individual thing. And what Chris said, I'll echo that. You know, what does retirement look like to you? It's not all about, I think what Chris was saying, it's not getting the maximum money. It's not all about the tax. We don't do anything just because of tax. We don't do anything for one reason. It's getting the maximum amount of life and enjoying life and being able to sustain that retirement that you want. And what I would say is that my job really focuses on demystifying the facts and the figures and applying it to actual, your real life, and to make sure that with the planning that we're doing, that you're in the best possible place to maximise what that's going to look like for you when you actually retire. So that's what I do.
Brilliant. Thank you, Julia. Right, next slide, please, Alice. Okay, so a big thank you to those of you who submitted questions via the pre-event survey. Lots of really good and interesting questions. What I would say is that some of them go and ask for quite a lot of detail, which I'm not sure we can cover in full this evening, but we'll do our best as far as that's concerned. If there are any particular questions that come up during our conversations today, please use the chat box. But when you do, can you make sure that you select a panel and organisers as the person you're sending it to, rather than send it to all? We've got some people behind the scenes who will collate those and present those questions back, so that we can hopefully reflect some good information back for you based on those. Also, look out for QR codes as they pop up. Particularly there will be at the end, and at the end there will be a link to a feedback form in the chat at the end of the event. Please do complete this, as it will help us shape what we do with the college in terms of helping support you guys. Okay, yes, next bit please, Alice. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover today. We're going to look at these three questions and then some top tips. So the first, we'll look at what are the personal considerations for you to think about when looking at reducing or fully retiring. What are the implications for the practice? What the next steps are for an individual GP and their practices, and then what are the top tips that the panel can give in terms of thinking about retirement, and then we'll look at the questions side of things. Okay, so moving swiftly on then to question number 1. For those GPs wanting to reduce sessions or retire in the near future, what should they be thinking about? And I'm going to start with you, Anita. What do you think?
Well, I think a good question is what really matters to you, and what makes your heart sing. And one clue to this I've found talking to colleagues who've been through retirement is, do you remember yourself as a teenager? Or maybe you don't want to remember yourself as a teenager, I don't know. But there were some clues there before medical training got hold of you and knocked you into shape. What did you really enjoy? And, you know, there may be some clues there when you start setting your personal goals. So what you should be thinking about at this stage is, you know, when to retire, what are actually your personal goals? Should I be reducing sessions? Should I be diversifying my career? And I was struck when Julia was talking just a little while back that her role is very similar to mine as a coach. So, you know, some people will find it useful to go for coaching or mentoring sessions around the stage where they're starting to first think about retirement, to find out a little bit more and to work on what really matters to them. Goals are very personal, and you can look at them in the sort of medium term around retirement. You can look at diversification of your career. You can look at how you actually retire from your practice. All these sort of plans you need to be starting to think about. And the sort of final stage of going through this process is actually relinquishing your license to practice, and that would be, you know, quite a big decision as well. So I would say start talking to peers, start talking to people like Julia, start talking to coaches and mentors, and try and find out and think, you know, find out a bit more about yourself and what really matters to you. Thanks.
Okay, Chris, can I come to you next? You've been
through the and I'd obviously reiterate everything really Anita said. I think when you're initially in these stages, often your prime concern is the practice, and I think Anita's points are very, very valid and very, very good in that respect, that you need to be thinking about yourself in there. But it's, and I think from personal experience, and obviously every situation, as we've already said a few times, are going to be so very, very different. But it's about really voicing and discussing these things within the practice, and thinking how it's going to work. What you can't do, obviously, clearly is go solo on this, and you know it has to be a very collegiate sort of process, but obviously clearly it's hugely individual. So it's about finding that balance, and the further out you can have these discussions with your partners, I think the better. But you know, it isn't just your partners, it's about your home life, those nearest and dearest to you, but fundamentally what you want to do. And it's also important to start to analyze really what it is that being a GP, being a doctor is to you. You know, we mustn't underestimate the importance to us. By this stage, we've often done this, you know, we've often been doctors for 35, 40 years. And you've got to actually look at yourself and work out how important the things are that have come with that. So I think it's about planning and talking about it early enough, but trying to analyze really, you know, what you're going to feel, what it is going to be like, particularly as Anita says, when you actually relinquish that license at the end point. Okay,
thank you. Mark, I appreciate you said that it wasn't necessarily a career choice at the point at which you've taken 24-hour retirement, but obviously with your vast experience, again, what are your thoughts about the personal considerations?
I tend to be I looked a lot at the money side of things at the time, I had long conversations. I looked at the application to leave. I've just pulled out some of my old forms from the time, the application to leave the NHS pension and all of those sort of things. But you've got to think about that. On the first thing, you've got the loyalty to your colleagues. Are you going to leave them in the lurch? And so it's picking your timing, assuming that you've got your lifetime allowances and everything sorted out. It's picking your timing of when you're going to go. Giving them a chance to adapt and bring other people in. No one's irreplaceable in general practice. Well, maybe there's no doctors nowadays, but apart from that, no one's irreplaceable in general practice. And so it's really a case of working with your colleagues and seeing where you're going. You've got to look, I think, at your income. And one of the things that I spoke to Julia a lot about is how much do you actually need? That was a very big conversation, is how much do you need to carry on? And I was quite surprised that the numbers are quite different when you're not working to when you are working. Are you ready to go? Well, obviously I wasn't, but a number of my colleagues have been and have gone over just recent years and so on. In fact, 3-4 of my last partners, I think, have gone in the last 5 to 6 years. So it's been something that's been a rolling thing. I think you've got to look at your pension valuation, and you've got to look at what difference is it going to make to you. On the 24-hour retirement thing, actually that's quite profitable if you want to do that, if you still feel there's enough energy in you to carry on. You've got to look at illness. There's an awful lot of colleagues that I know that have become ill at this stage of our life. And really, you know, when I started, everyone that was ill was older than me. Now they're all younger than me. It's something you've got to think about. So I think you've got to wrap up all of those things, look at the money, look at your lifestyle, look at your health, and look at your colleagues, and then come to a conclusion of what is the right moment, and then plan it ahead and actually phase it in and give your colleagues a chance, because we've worked together for years. Thank you. Okay,
thank you. Julia, what do you hear, and what's your experience of the considerations that GPs are looking at?
A lot of what I hear is that that question that you mentioned earlier, where retirement isn't retire and that's it. It's not a cliff edge type of situation. It's very much a case where people will take retirement, 24-hour retirement, they'll go back to work, or they'll go early, they'll do something else, they'll change the nature of what they do. They may go from being a partner to becoming a locum. There's lots of different ways that you can really sort of wind down what you're doing. The things to be thinking about, and what Chris was saying about, you know, planning ahead, it's really never too early to get that plan in place. I can say I've had quite a few situations this year where people have been referred to me within 6 months of retiring. We haven't got a total reward statement. We've uncovered annual allowance tax charges where the client wasn't aware of those tax charges. So the sooner you start, the better. So within 5 years of when you think you're going to go, definitely start really trying to understand and to get some insight into how much you're going to get, the cash flows that Mark was talking about. But even before that, much before that, it's really just to keep an eye on things. And I think what Anita was saying about my role being very much like that of a coach, I think what tends to happen when you're very busy and you're doing the job that you do every day, you don't wake up in the morning and think, I know what to do, I'm going to look at my pension today. It just doesn't happen. So I would say just make a bit of time to take some time out and just look and understand, look at what you've got and understand what you have. It's not just the NHS pension. There are other resources you probably have. You might have ABCs, you might have been contributing to an ISA, you might have plans to downsize. There's lots of different things that come into play. So that it's not just thinking about the NHS pension, but of course there are things related to the pension, understanding what the implications are if you leave, and then if you're in various sections of the scheme, does it mean that you can then go back to work and still contribute to the pension, or is it the end of the road for the NHS pension? So a lot of the work that I do with my clients is really understanding how they want their retirement to look and at what period do they actually proper retire. And for many of my clients, it's not 60, it's not even 65, you know, and often they'll say to me, as long as I love what I do, And as long as I'm fit and as long as I'm healthy, I'm going to keep doing it. It's my lifeblood. I enjoy it. And if maybe I'm not going to work 9 sessions, but I might, just gradually go down. And I think that, retirement is very different for everybody. And I think just understanding what you've got in the pot, what potential threats there are in terms of tax to your pension, and how you can really maximize what you have. That's what I would be saying to my clients. They're starting to look.
Okay, thank you. Can I just chuck a quick bit of advice that you might want to give your colleagues? Because what we are seeing a lot topically is that, and I'm reflecting what I've heard there, that having goals and planning for them is a really important part of this. We are coming across, unsurprisingly, a growing number of GPs who are, because of COVID, because of the stresses and strains that they faced, are saying, I just want to go now. And there's a conflict there between, well, I was planning to go at this time, and that was what my monetary goal was to achieve that, but I want to go now. What advice would you give to those? Does anybody want to throw something in there?
And if I may, I'll say something on that. I don't think the NHS pension is as good as I was led to believe when I was a youngster. I know I'm a bit of a cynic on that, but it's much less than, particularly after tax and everything, it's much less than I was really ever thought. So I think if you're going to go early, it's going to be even smaller, and you've got to be a bit careful of that.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to sort of say, yeah, I'd reiterate that. You may be feeling really under pressure at the moment, and that's totally understandable. But if you can sort of hang on, maybe sort of alter your sessions a bit for a while, look at things like, I don't know, some of you will have sabbaticals in your partnership agreements. Just do a little bit of research, diversify a bit, but hang on in there rather than taking a big hit with your pension, which will have implications for not only yourself longer term, but it also, if you've got a family, it will have implications for your children as well.
Okay, thank you. Chris, is there anything you want to add before we move on to our first exciting poll?
No, well, I mean, obviously, clearly, it depends how desperate you are to get out, really, and what you're prepared to sacrifice for that, really. And I think, it's that assessment of, in all of this, am I prepared to sacrifice things to escape the present? But as Anita says, if there's anything you can do to preserve it, because as Mark says, you want to maximize your return, hopefully for as long as possible. So yeah, depends how desperate you are, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you all. Alice, would you like to move us on to our exciting poll? So if you could all reach for your device or laptop and click on, how confident are you? I can't read it now. Michelle's put it up there. How confident are you that you can that you understand your personal retirement strategy? Are you not at all confident, partially confident? We've got not at all confident there twice. So are you totally confident? I think if we go number 1, partially confident or not at all confident. So the top one should be totally confident, second one partially, third one not at all. So we'll just give it a little while whilst you rush to click and select 1, 2 or 3 there. And Michelle will ping up the results of this exciting moment in this evening's festivities. Okay, so that says that a third of you are very confident. That's excellent. The majority of you are partially confident, which is good news. That is good news. It means that you've thought about it, you've got some ideas, and it's what else you can therefore do in terms of firming up your plan. So thank you for that. Excellent. Okay, onwards. So next slide, please, Alice. Now, we've already sort of started to touch on the implications, not just for the individual, but for the practice. And I think that is the next place to go and explore what that means for those that either remain or that you're going to work with on a slightly different basis because of the decisions you make. So, Chris, could you kick us off on this one? How about the impact on the practice and those remaining?
Again, this will be completely and utterly variable. I came from a situation whereby we'd had an extremely stable situation over my 30 years. We'd effectively only had 2 changes in the partnership of 4, which clearly has massive advantages, but clearly also there is risk there when we come to the end. And the reality was that effectively 3 of us went within 5 years. But in truth, we'd put a huge amount of effort into building a successful practice, delivering all we really wanted to for our patients. And so actually we probably 10 years ago were already beginning to think about how we replace individuals at a time as well when it wasn't particularly attractive to think of getting people into partnerships. Particularly there was a huge surge in salaried doctors at the time. I think in truth we were lucky. We were a training practice, which I think actually is also hugely helpful in that obviously you've got exposure to a number of doctors. They see how you work, you see how they work. So I think we were prepared. We were doing what I think was the appropriate planning. And as hopefully, as I've said before, we were talking about it way out, and we've left behind a group of people who we're really quite proud of, and feel that the practice is in safe hands. So again, really at risk of repeating myself, it's about getting that planning right, and also I suspect being a bit lucky as well.
Okay, thank you. Mark, I'll come to you next. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, a few years back, it was easy. You could get a GP to replace a GP, and it was as if nothing happened. Maybe a little bit of training issue, but nothing of any significance. Currently, we're in a position where getting new GPs is almost impossible. I put out a call on the PCN network just this week and found that all the PCNs around where I am are looking at practices, are looking for GPs and can't find them. So really, it's the question, if you're on the receiving end, and I need 3 new GPs at the moment, if anyone wants to volunteer, we've got a fabulous new surgery, quick sale there. But what we've done is actually relook at how we're delivering general practice, because general practice of old with no GPs to replace is a doomed ship. And we've gone down a very different road. We've got a huge number of paramedics, AMPs, pharmacists, physiotherapists, and everything that are taking an awful lot of the work away from the general practice. We still have, obviously, the GPs are working flat out all the time, as all GPs are. But the way that I see it is, if I can't get a GP to replace a GP, I've got to get an AMP or a paramedic or a team of people to do that same job of work, keeping the GPs for the more complicated cases or the more difficult cases. And that actually is working really well. And the PCN, because obviously I'm a clinical director of the PCN, has, with the RS funding, we're maxed out on RS funding. I don't know if everyone else is. I think most are about 40% spent, but we're probably slightly over 100%. It's made an enormous difference to surviving when people have left and you haven't got new GPs to replace them. So how can it impact the practice? Devastatingly, if you don't plan ahead, is my answer to that one.
Thank you. Anita?
Yeah, I'm just going to talk about relinquishing roles and letting go. And our practice adopted a different approach. They headhunted a GP to replace me with similar sort of skills that I was bringing to the practice. And there was an overlap. So I sort of went through a period of possibly about a year where I was sort of handing over roles and handing over intelligence. And that was slightly strange period for me, but it worked really well. And my replacement partner sort of, just flew after I left. One thing I just would like to sort of flag up here is I didn't really notice any problems in sort of handing over to this very competent partner, but a rather strange thing happened in a very harmonious partnership right at in the last few months of me being there, which was actually getting myself out of the building. And I think that there's a minefield there. And it's thanks to our financial advisor, really, who was able to come up with a formula that helped my successor buy in, and me also to take the equity out of the practice. And I think at the end of the day, nobody felt too hard done by, but it could have been very difficult. Some of my peers have found it impossible to extricate themselves and are absentee landlords and not wishing to be so. So I think that is an area to sort of think about, and that sort of came up on me without warning, really. So that is something to maybe discuss ahead of time with your financial advisors.
Okay, thank you. So talking of which, Julia, what's your perspective on the impact on practice?
Yes, well, this is what I'm seeing, all of what you've been saying. I have GP saying to me, we're all getting older together. We've sort of we've been in practice together, 4 of us, 5 of us, for the last 20 odd years. And we need to think about this. And there may be one partner that has different views, and it can be very difficult, as Anita was saying. And as Mark was saying, the young doctors now, they don't want partnership. They are shying away from it, looking more at portfolio careers and going down that path. Clients saying to me, I don't want to be the last man standing. It's really frightening. I'm very, very worried about it. So there's a lot there to have those conversations. I think that's the answer, isn't it? It's just to have those conversations early, and look at your partnership agreement, and definitely take advice around the partnership agreement to make sure that it is modern and right for what's needed now, because it may have been drawn up a few decades ago, let's say, possibly. I believe it or not, I do come across some practices without them. But look at the partnership agreement. Just see that it's a level playing field and equal for everybody. We obviously don't advise on that as financial advisors, but get some advice around that. Also, what Mark was saying is I'm seeing more of this practices where I do a lot of work with practices to protect the partners in terms of their liabilities under the partnership agreement with locums. If they were off sick, obviously, they're duty bound to provide in their absence a locum cover. But I'm having conversations with practice managers and partners saying, well, actually, our AMP, our paramedic, they are doing the job of the doctor. So if we're covering them, we need to cover them as if they're a doctor. So there are there's a huge shift, there's huge changes going on at the moment. And I think that making sure that everything is up to date in the context of this new world is the best thing best sort of comment I can make, which is obviously iterated by everybody, Chris, Anita and Mark.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so I think what I'm hearing there is that engaging with your partners, planning and looking at new ways for the practice to work long term are the key takeaways from that. So really interesting. So thank you. On to the next poll, I believe. So does your practice have a long-term strategy for the retirement of GPs and other key staff? Yes or no? So again, if you could reach for your buttons and have a click on that. So I'm hoping the majority of you are going to say, yes, of course we do, because we've all thought about this. So I hope you're all going to be honest about this. People are still clicking away. Oh, here we go. And the answer is no. Okay. So a really good takeaway from this evening then is definitely next time you sit down with your partners is to say, right, what are we doing about this? Because it is an accelerating piece. Yeah, interesting. Thank you very much. Right. So on to the third question then. So how do you start this process? So for GPs of all ages, what are the key next steps for yourselves, for the practices? How do you start the process of planning for the retirement? So Mark, do you want to start us off? I appreciate, again, you went back into work, but what are your views?
Right. So how did I start to plan for it? Is I started looking at the protections. I was hearing noise around as I was doing the accounts and all those sorts of bits and pieces, and people were saying, well, you've got to look at this and you've got to look at that and you've got to sign up for your lifetime protection. And I suddenly realized that although I thought I knew it all, I hadn't looked at any of it. And I hadn't kept up with the changes that were coming on very recently. I'd been to a number of lectures and everything else, but I'm not sure I really absorbed what was the impact of that. So I then started speaking to yourselves, obviously, and thought, oh my God, I really am not up to date with this because they've changed the law completely. And that was a bit of a shock. So I immediately had to find out what was my pension worth, what was I at, and I had to start calculating at what time do I want to retire, how much is the pension going to be left, and what impact is that going to have on me. I then had to bounce backwards and forwards between the various agencies, the pension agency and everything, and they all say, oh, you've got to talk to the other agency, and that went on multiple times, trying to pin down these allowances and these lifetime bits and how much my pension was. And eventually I got to the stage where I could see the numbers. And once I could see the numbers, I realized that, oh, I really do have to jump ship at this point. And that's when I notified my partners that I was going for the 24-hour retirement. So for me, it was all about looking at the numbers, looking at the money and trying to work out, and particularly the tax bill afterwards, if I got it wrong. That was quite significant. And thanks, guys, you saved me a lot of money there. But everyone else, if you haven't done that, please talk to them and look at it, because it is crucial. A lot of money. Thank you.
Yeah, I will say, I already seeing in the chat, and we already had it in the questions, total reward statements and getting hold of them is an absolute nightmare. Dare I swear on this webinar and say PCSE? Oh, there are some significant challenges with their processing. Might I suggest that absolutely what Mark said there is crucial. The earlier you start looking at that and understanding that, the better, because correcting mistakes way ahead of retiring is a lot easier and less stressful than doing it actually when you're about to try and fill out your AW8 and actually retire. So yeah, that's a really good point, Mark, a really, really good point. Chris, can I come to you next? So do you want to talk to us a little bit about where you started with this?
Well, again, I mean, the very fortunate thing was having engagement probably from at least 10 or perhaps even 12 years ago with Wesleyan and being pushed to make these considerations. And yeah, indeed, you know, protecting the lifetime allowance. And then for me personally, because of the annual allowance, I deferred my pension from 2016 to my retirement at 2020, which again was one of the things that then pushed me towards retiring a couple of years early in 2020, in that obviously I wasn't actively growing my pension at that stage. So again, risk of being repetitive, it is about seeking that advice, speaking to the people who do understand it, who can give us assurances that, you know, if you do keep hammering away at the pensions agency, etc., or whatever they're now called, you know, the reality is, you know, you can just about get them to deliver the goods. But yeah, you know, again, at risk of it, it's, you know, get in there early and speak to your advisor who will give you the waypoints really to be making these decisions.
Thank you. Anita, your thoughts, and have you seen elsewhere, it may have happened to yourself, any of the trip hazards, mistakes people have made, or things that they would do differently, how'd their time again?
Right, okay, that's an interesting one. I hadn't really thought that one through, but I will, while I'm starting to answer the question, I will try and get round to that. So actually, I'm just going to move away from money just slightly, and so the next steps would be to pick up from Julia, get that partnership agreement out, have a look at it. How much flexibility is there? Is there a sabbatical clause? If I start diversifying my career mid-career, how is that going to work? Is the money going to go into the practice? Am I going to cut my hours and take on an extra role? And I mentioned diversification of careers mid-career because it's what sustained me through retirement and into retirement. So I'm a little bit older than probably most people here, and I have survived retirement, and I have a very fulfilling well, I'm not actually retired because I still do some professional duties and I'm still a coach and mentor, but I've retired clinically. And it's because I had the foresight looking back to actually diversify mid-career that I've been able to do this and end up healthy, feeling well, and I may not have as much money as if I'd really planned it, but that was my personal choice, and I do have enough money to have a high quality of life. What happened? I had a sabbatical, and what I did was I decided that I was going to go away from Sheffield. I was going to experience general practice as a locum in another part of the country, and also just cut my hours for a bit and pursue a few hobbies. So this was about 10 years before I retired, but looking back on it, it was actually preparation for retirement because it taught me how to set up as a locum, which is what I did after. I didn't do 24-hour retirement. I worked as a locum after I retired from my practice, which gave me the flexibility that I needed. So coming back to the question you threw at me, Simon, which is, have you come across peers that have had difficulties? Yes, definitely. And I, in fact, quite a few who have had what I describe as the cliff edge retirement because they haven't diversified, because they've thought that retiring and just giving up the clinical role, giving up the links with the profession, that would solve all their problems, but actually it created more. And going more slowly and maintaining your networks, I've found the colleagues that have done the same as me with diversification and maintaining networks have a much more healthy and fruitful retirement post-clinical work. So I hope I did get round to answering your question, Simon.
You did. Thank you for that.
Simon, if I could just cut back in, I think one of the things I've discovered, certainly through my wife's experiences with PCSE is, and I've seen in the chat, there's quite a lot of people having quite significant problems, is to raise complaints very early with them. Because actually I suspect probably they spend most of their working time dealing with the complaint. So I think my advice there would be get a complaint in early.
That's a really good shout. That's a really good shout. Yes, if we had a magic wand with PCSE, then we would wave it for sure. That's a really good shout. Persistency, Julia. I mean, again, your thoughts on getting going?
Oh yes. On this subject, so because we're on it, the NHS pension, PCSE, getting an up-to-date statement, not being able to get it, all of that. Definitely get that statement up to date. know that all of the years that you've been paying in are accounted for, and they're on that statement. Situations this year are that I probably have about 24 of my clients retiring. Of that number, about 50% of them, because they're having a fact freeze at the moment, they call it, at NHS pensions, nothing is going to happen. I've been told by them that the only way to get anything done for retiring clients is to retire and put in an AW8. And I'm working with people trying to estimate their benefits based on a statement that is maybe 7 years old. And it's quite disconcerting, because one would want to know really exactly what you were going to get at retirement. So we're doing our best. But these are clients that have maybe just been referred to me within the last 6 months, where they've come to me and they've had these issues. But definitely get that complaint in with PCSE, get your statement updated. In terms of what Mark was saying, what he did was to keep up with the changes in terms of what's going on. Get that advice if you need it. Make sure that you're sort of on that journey, and that you're aware of what's happening with the various changes to the scheme. And one of the things I think Chris said is to push. I was pushed to sort of make these changes, and a lot of my role in terms of what I do is I can't count them, so many letters of authority that I've got with NHS pensions on my clients' behalf to talk to them. And I sit there on a Friday afternoon and I'll call NHS pensions and I'll have about 10 clients. So they might get a bit annoyed with me, but it's better that it's just me ringing up about 10 clients. And we eventually get there. We do get there in the end. So I'm on that journey with my clients. I really appreciate how hard it is to get this information. But the key thing is get it and then keep on at it. Make sure it's up to date. Make sure that the forms that you're filling in, that PCSE have acknowledged that they have them, and that when they do have them, that they've passed that information to NHS pensions. Like you were saying, Simon, to unravel something that goes back 15, 20 years, where you may have worked in a hospital and that you're being told by NHS pensions that they can't do anything because there's an open record, and you can't get any HR department in where you worked before to shut the record. It becomes a stalemate. So the earlier you start to just get that up-to-date pension, no matter where you are on that journey, just get that statement, get the numbers, as Mark was saying, definitely get those numbers after you've got the statement, and then make your plan.
I also to add to that, it's not just between hospitals. If any of you out there have worked in the other nations, so Scotland, working now in England, vice versa, etc., that is often something that you need to go back and just look at very carefully to make sure that it's been done correctly. So doing it early. I just see, and I started it by saying AW8. It's an AW8. We saw a question from Eric there, I think. And the AW8 is the form that you have to fill out and send to the NHS pensions to say, I want to take my pension. That's all it is. It's the actual form. And again, we do spend quite a bit of time helping people with that because it is a very busy form. Yeah, but that's the magic one that unlocks your pension eventually. Okay. Anything else anybody wants to add to that personal, the next steps bit? No? Okay. Well, let's get on with the poll then. So the next poll, sorry, Alice, I'm messing about tonight. Have you reviewed your personal retirement plans with a specialist financial advisor in the last 2 years? Yes or no? Over to you. Click away. Once we've done this poll, we'll then be on to everyone's top tips. And I'm going to start with one which has kind of been covered already, but I'll chuck one in there as well. So hopefully everyone's clicking away, got used to this poll business now. And the answer is well, reasonably even. So some of you have taken advantage of that. Hopefully those that said no are now thinking very serious about it and getting some help with putting all this together. So thank you for that. A very interesting poll. So Okay, so this will be the top tips. If you could, what would you tell your 30-year-old self? And I will ask everybody in the panel to keep that to the retirement planning side of things, not the other things that you perhaps would talk to yourself about. My one would be is when you take on your partnership, we've already covered this, look at your partnership agreement. Absolutely, that's the first thing you should do to make sure it is relevant to the current partnership. In particular with retirement, what I'd say is just to build in that, have a look at any restrictive covenants. You might be merrily away doing a job because you've diversified, and via the practice you're doing some research work or university work, and you go, well, I'll carry on that, but actually that link is with the practice, and there is a restricted covenant that says you can't work with practices previous other roles that come through there. And the other key one is always have a look at your partnership agreement. As part of the planning of a practice, there may be only one partner can retire in any 6-month or 12-month period. So there's a couple of you in the partnership of the same age, you might want to have a word with your practice manager sooner rather than later and say, can I put my notice in, if that's what you're looking to do. Anyway, right. Top tips. Anita, would you like to start us with what would you tell your 30-year-old self?
I would say, don't be afraid of carrying on doing appraisals and revalidating. It's actually been simplified quite a bit recently, and it's not too onerous, and really you've got to be prepared to work a little bit longer than perhaps people have in the past to get the financial rewards. If you give up your license to practice too early, everything sort of closes down on you, and you tend to be quite limited in your options, with other sort of roles outside of straight general practice. So that would be the first one. Be very careful about relinquishing license to practice coming off the performers list. The second thing is something which I would say to my 30-year-old self. Just because you're taking out a mortgage on a house for 25 years or whatever it is, doesn't mean that you actually have to take 25 years to pay it off. And one of the best bits of financial advice I got was every time you've got a bit of spare cash, just pay off a bit of the mortgage. And I managed to pay off the mortgage in my early 50s, and your disposable income goes up quite considerably, and your quality of life in your 50s goes up. And I can't stress that enough, because things do start getting a bit more difficult in your 60s and your late 60s. You do slow up a bit, and it's absolutely great to be able to enjoy life, have good time away from work in your 50s when you're healthy. It also gives the opportunity. I know I mentioned having children and grandchildren, etc. That is part of these considerations as well. If you do that, you also can support your kids at a time when they're needing to sort of set up and start up. So yeah, so don't relinquish your license to practice, and consider paying off your mortgage early.
Okay, thank you. Mark, can we come to you next? What would you tell your self?
I think the most important thing is get advice early. That's got to be it, because as GPs, as clinical people, we haven't got a clue. If we needed an operation, we'd call a surgeon. If you need some pension advice, call an expert on the pensions. And I would actually do that. I think if you get in early and get an understanding, it will change as it goes along. If you're 30, obviously it's going to change in the next 20 years, but you're going to have a real appreciation. When I was 30, I don't think I ever gave 30 seconds towards my pension, to be honest. We were all told it's the best thing since sliced bread and NHS pension, and then they pulled the rug out on it. So you've got a plan. I think I've said it all along, you've got to look at your numbers. Paying off your mortgage early, yes, absolutely. But as you go along in your career, all of those things become much easier. And you have very different monies at the end of your career to the beginning of your career, that's for certain. So I'd work out your numbers, I'd work out your monies and work out your tax. I'd also look at, is the NHS, well, you heard I was a bit of a cynic earlier because, hey ho, but I'd look at, would you be better off putting your money elsewhere and actually saving and putting, if you do it, you've got to make sure you save for your pension. You can't just think and then spend it. But if you did, there may be other opportunities, and talking again to your financial advisors, they can tell you if it's good or bad or anything else. So my top tip is get in early, talk to a professional, a financial advisor, and then make your mind up.
Brilliant, thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I think I'd speak to my 30-year-old self and say in 30 years' time, people will talk about work-life balance. And I'd say, oh, that's not the way we've been brought up. But yeah, work-life balance, really important, setting those priorities early. I think I'd tell my 30-year-old self that the next 30 years will fly by in an instant, because it certainly has done. And very unoriginally, as the third of these bits of advice, it's take that advice early. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you. Julia, what are your thoughts?
I would say to my 30-year-old self, I'd say, what do you really want? What path are you traveling here? And in the context of my clients, it's very much, I often get asked, when can I retire? And I often say to them, if you had a magic wand and money was no object, when would you actually retire? So on that basis, what we can then do is we can look at different scenarios, and we can look at a plan on how maybe it might not be that crazy to retire at 50 or 55. So create that plan, work on it, make time to do it. And what I would say is some people that I meet, they're quite nervous about it. They're quite nervous about meeting a financial advisor. It all sounds very grand. It's not, it's me, it's not, frightening at all. And take that time out just to talk about what you really want. And it comes out in that conversation sometimes that you had this preconceived idea that you had to work until your state retirement age. And because the normal retirement age for this scheme is 65 or now aligned to state pension age, I can't retire until that point. So get that plan. And when, I suppose the other thing I'd say to my 30-year-old self is that when life comes in uninvited and stuff happens to you in life, once that's happened, just get back on the plan and get back on that trajectory to where you really want to go. And don't lose sight of what you want. And even if you started out wanting to retire at 55 and you had a plan that you could, if you decide then to go on to 60, 65, it makes a difference, because you can say to yourself, if I want to go, I can. And that's very empowering. And it gives you a sense of freedom to be able to go and enjoy, those years where you're reaping the rewards of the hard work that you've put in over the years.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting actually. One of the points that was kind of made there. One of the questions we got before tonight was around the opportunities or the options to retire in your 40s. Whenever we're sort of talking to certainly early years GPs about financial planning, the idea of financial planning, I put it in the context, you can retire in your 40s if that's what you want. It's all about the choices you make in relation to the competing priorities you've got on your time and your resources. So, a 30-year-old could retire at 45. They might not be able to afford to eat in the meantime because they're putting all their money into other vehicles. But it's possible. It's down to an individual to say, like you said there, Julia, what do I actually want? And then just having a plan for that. So thank you. Some good top tips there. Okay, right. Moving on then. We're now into the questions that have come in from your good self. So the team behind the scenes are madly working through the questions you've sent in on the chat this evening to put some in front of us. Let's just pick up some ones that came beforehand as a start. So advice, please. And I think, Anita, this is definitely one for you to pick up. Advice, please, for coping with the lack of structure to the day after stopping working, and how to keep mentally stimulated.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Lack of structure. Well, each day when you retire from your main role as a GP, each day will be different. So it's not that it's unstructured. It's not that you're not doing anything. It's a much more complicated structure, because you will find that you have so many transferable skills as a general practitioner that the minute you give up your practice, you have so many different people asking you to do so many different things, and you have to be quite careful and learn to say no on a lot of occasions, because you certainly get a lot of mental stimulation, and I don't know any of my peers that have not had hundreds of different opportunities coming their way when the minute they've said that they're retiring from their practice. Mentally stimulated, well, again, I go back to what I said at the very beginning. What made your heart sing as a teenager? There are clues there, and you can pick up some of those threads that you had to leave off when you went into training for medicine and to be a general practitioner. So, for instance, you'll find colleagues who have an interest in music. They've managed to keep up a bit by playing a musical instrument, but they retire and they've got time to join an orchestra. For myself, I've been particularly interested in natural history. Well, I'm part of a wildlife trust now, and I get a lot of pleasure from that. I used to sew a lot. I never had time as a doctor to do any of that. And in retirement, I get a lot of pleasure out of doing quilting. So it's interesting. You do get mental stimulation. You keep up your networks from professional days, and you develop other networks during retirement. But it's not a lack of structure, I don't think. I think it's a different structure. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else got any thoughts on that particular point?
Yeah, I think I've got a few thoughts on that. It's going to be horses for courses. Some people really don't want to do very much. Some people are very dynamic and want to do a lot. So it's going to be whatever makes it right for the person. So for myself, keeping mentally stimulated is staying with the businesses that I've got, with the merger of the practices, with the PCN, transforming general practice. I mean, I find that really quite exciting. But I do other things, and I keep those there. I write computer programs, I write apps. That's something I've always enjoyed doing as a professional programmer in the past. Reading a lot. It probably depends on how much sleep you need in a day to do it all. But generally, I'd say do whatever rings your bell. Just enjoy life and keep the brain active.
I think for me, one of the things that was important to get sorted in my head as I've gone through this peri-retirement is getting away from the feeling that part of my life was work and duty and responsibility, and part of it was leisure. And slowly but surely, I've now got round to a situation whereby most of my days now feel normal, and I've lost that difference between the two. But obviously, clearly, whilst you are busy working, you really do separate the two. The working, the duty, and the leisure. And I think slowly but surely, the leisure side, the interest side, and again, whatever other avenues you go down, sort of normalize as being the normal part of your normal life. So that possibly not the most clear of little statements, but it's about the normalizing of the other things.
Okay, that is. I mean, the three of you there have actually sort of given quite good insight in some everything you said there, but also in the idea of it's okay, just take that step back and look, and it will, if you give yourself that time, you will find your own path in terms of that. So that's really interesting. Now, I'm going to go technical for a bit. So I'm going to bring Julia in here because we are getting a wealth of questions around some of the bit more of the technicalities, and we're getting multiple questions on those. So I think we need to please those parts of the audience. So Julia, right. So if we look, first of all, the different sections. So a couple of people now have raised this. So hang on a minute. How does this work with the 95, the 2008, the 2015? What does it all mean? And I think if we look particularly at the point of retirement and how that works around lump sums, etc. How does this work?
Right. So the chances are you're going to be either in the 95 solely, which is a scheme where the normal retirement age is 60. The 2008 entirely, which is a normal retirement age of 65, or you're potentially going to be in, well, I think a lot of you, unless you're that very close to retirement, the likelihood is you're going to be in both sections. So you're going to be in the 95, and as of 2022, everybody is going to be in the new career average section, the 2015 section, which has a retirement age aligned to your state pension age. So you've got there's a lot around this piece when I'm seeing clients where they're looking to perhaps take the pension early, retire and return, take the pension separately, defer the pension, all sorts of different ways that you can take these pensions, but there are some restrictions on some. For example, with the 95 section, if you take your benefits from that section, you can no longer contribute to the NHS pension. So that's something to be mindful of. With the other sections, you can. In terms of lump sum, this question, I see it, I've been seeing it keep popping up. Can we take a lump sum? And it's also on the pre-questions. The answer is that the 95 has an automatic lump sum, which is always going to be 3 times the pension. However, in that section, you can commute and take more than 3 times the pension. It's a notional, it's a 25%. It has to be worked back. In terms of pension rules, you can take 25% of your pension as tax-free cash, subject to having enough lifetime allowance to be able to do so. So the 2008 and 2015 don't come with an automatic lump sum. However, again, you can commute to the equivalent of 25% of the pot and take that tax-free cash and take that lump sum. And a question that I get a lot is, well, Julia, you know, what is the best thing for me to do? What should I take the tax-free cash at the maximum, or should I take the pension? And that's where the planning comes in line with what you're looking to do, what you're looking to achieve. And people take the tax-free cash for a few reasons. I mean, firstly, it's tax-free, so that's attractive. Secondly, you've got control of that money. It's in your estate. If you were to lose your spouse, sadly, that spouse pension is always on the pre-commuted pension amount, so you're not there's not any loss there. And also, what Anita was saying earlier, you know, when you're young and you're fit and you're healthy, you might want to front load your capital to do all of those things that you want to enjoy, or pay off the mortgage or whatever it is in your plan. So the different sections, it can get confusing, particularly with McLeod at the moment and what's going on there and how's that going to affect me. But it's suffice to say they've got different ages, normal retirement ages. If you take any of those pensions earlier than those normal retirement ages, 60, 95, 2008, 65, the new scheme aligned to state pension age, you'll suffer an actual reduction. Now I say suffer, but actually you need to look at what you can look at what you stand to lose, and I'll say that lose inverted commas, because actually it's what you have to gain. So often what I'm doing with clients is looking at these scenarios, looking at, well, if I take this section early, take this reduction, what's the tax-free cash here? If I take the section at normal pension age and I carry on working at this level for the next 5 years, what is it in my pocket? What's the difference? What does it mean in my pocket? Because if there are lifetime allowance tax charges, and let's not forget that the pension itself is subject to income tax, what you stand to gain might be that lifestyle in the last 5 years of perhaps not working 9 sessions or 8 sessions, but being able to shift down. I would ignore to some extent the normal retirement ages in planning, and I would look firstly at the end, at the objectives. What do you really want? What are you looking to achieve? Let's see what's in the pot. Let's see how it could work for you. And if knowing what you stand to lose, if that is £100 a month, and the fact that you've taken your pension early would mean that you were 78 before you were any worse off, a lot of my clients look at me and say, well, that doesn't worry me. I'll be 78. So there's lots to consider here. But does that answer the question, or do we need some more on retiring and returning?
I'm being given a time check, so I'm going to pick up a couple of points. I hate to say this, but we do have loads of materials on this kind of thing we do separately, or you can just sit down and talk to us about the individual differences. But can I just tick off a couple of things that have appeared multiple times on the questions? Apologies for the sessional GPs, the salaried GPs and potentially portfolio GPs that work on here. Yes, there does seem to have been a bit of a bias talking about partnership. And one of the reasons for that is, as a salaried GP or a locum GP, the responsibilities, the difficulties of extracting yourself, of having an exit strategy is somewhat less than a partner. A partner's got to extricate themselves from the partnership, which can be quite a complicated thing. But the vast majority of the basics of retiring are exactly the same. Which there's the other question then of, well, what's the implications of working less? Very simply, under the 95 scheme, the 2008 and the 2015 scheme, if you work less, you earn less, it means that your pension grows at a slower rate. Less goes towards your final pension amount. So plotting what that means for you, and we use a cash flow modelling tool. So we look at what your outgoings are, what your expected outgoings might be, and we plot those against, well, okay, so if I actually do reduce those sessions, what will it mean? Can I still afford to do that? Or what does it mean long term? And what will it mean to my retirement at the end? So hopefully I've covered two bases there. McLeod. Okay, again, conscious of time, big topic. Look out for our webinars on McLeod. But in simple terms, thanks to Judge Victoria McLeod, who took everybody to court on this one. When you come to the point of retirement, you will have a choice as to whether the 7 years which were at debate and are now deemed to be discriminatory on an age basis, the 7 years from 2015 to 2022, so this end of March, you will get to decide whether any service that had moved into the 15 stays as 2015 service or reverts back to 1995 service. And for those of you looking to retire as close to 60 as possible, well, that might give you the clue as to which one's going to be best for you, because that 7 years will be a good chunk of service. However, there may be some people who are short of service who are looking to maximize their benefits. It might be a good thing for them to stick with that in the 2015 because the accrual rate is higher. The other linkage then is with annual allowance. Some of you may have had to pay annual allowance charges during that 7 year period, if when you come to retire you have elected for it to go back to the 95 scheme, and because the speed at which it grows is less, you might not have had an annual allowance charge. If that is the case, you get a rebate. So some good news there for the point of when you retire. So you'll get a choice. So that's the implications. And yes, we will. It's important to factor that into your planning. In terms of McLeod might make it easier to retire or semi-retire, or I think Chris, you call it peri-retirement. I like that. That becomes more of an option at that stage. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I think we're kind of moving into the wrapping up part of it, which is about this whole idea of taking your pension and retiring. Used to be the norm. It used to be you'd work up to 60 and then you'd retire and you take your pension. Just again, I know we've kind of touched on this, but any other thoughts the panel have got about that increasing separation, as the questions ask, between when you take your pension and retiring, and that flexibility?
Perhaps I should jump in on that one, because that's more or less what I've done with the 24-hour pension. It does, or 24-hour retirement. What it does do is it massively bumps up your income. Because if you carry on working, you've got your previous income, but you've also got your pension income, and you get your superannuation that you were paying into the pension pot. So for as long as you carry on, it is actually a significant increase in earnings. Also a significant increase in tax, of course, but you've got to get it to pay it. So my view is, if you want to carry on working, look at the timing in particular, because you don't want to get the penalties of exceeding the lifetime allowances and the like. Carry on. The rules of 24-hour retirement were very simple. You only could do so many hours a week for so many weeks, and then you could be back to full time. So it's like being on holiday for a few weeks and then you come back. And that worked really, really well. It was very, very easy. My partners were happy with it. And literally, we were straight back to there. So yeah, I'd recommend it.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
perhaps if I add to that, I think the difference for me between taking my pension and retiring. So taking my pension was at the point where I felt that I needed more flexibility in my life. So it was giving up and it was a normal retirement age of just, well, it was under 60 in my case. So giving up the having to work fixed sessions per week and getting flexibility. So I carried on working as a locum. I had the opportunity of developing my clinical practice, because I worked in a couple of practices that were completely different from the practice that I'd worked in previously. So I found myself working with settled refugees from all over the world, which was absolutely fascinating. So I chose as a locum, the benefits of being a locum is you choose when you work. So you can fit that around developing your other interests in preparation for, during the peri-retirement years, for a time when you're giving up clinical practice. And I would say that I'm not retired, even though I've given up clinical practice. I don't regard myself as a retired person. It's because I work as a coach and as a mentor and as a GP appraiser. So it is, they're completely different things now. And I think that GPs retiring now are really pushing taking their pensions now, are really sort of pushing the boundaries and starting to be very imaginative about the years after taking the pension.
Okay, thank you. Chris, anything you want to add to that?
Little I can add to both those excellent pieces there. Again, take sound advice to give you the flexibility to do the things that you want to do.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm conscious I'm going to get shouted at in a minute in terms of the timekeeping, but there's a couple of quick questions I want to go through that come through. Do you work with consultants as well? Yes, we do. If you're a hospital consultant, we have a whole different set of specialist FCs that go out and talk to hospitals. So fill out the same form and we'll get the right person to you. What's the difference between 24-hour retirement and coming out of the pension scheme? The simple difference is, as Mark was saying there, is that with the 24-hour retirement, you're taking your pension. And therefore, the difference is your income goes up massively once you return. If you come out of the pension, it sits there waiting for you. What does also happen is some of the other benefits that you get with a pension scheme, such as the ill health retirement, the death in service benefits, are slightly diluted if you're an inactive member of the pension scheme. So do watch out for that. I think we've covered that. Are we going to talk more about McLeod? I could talk about McLeod for a long time. Unfortunately, we don't have time this evening, but come and talk to us about it and what the impact will be, and let us help you model that in terms of your retirement. And a question about lifetime allowance. This is a really good one, because if you are in the position that you can do something about lifetime allowance and manage your numbers, as Mark has very eloquently said, it is important. the question is about when it applies. It applies at the point at which you, bit of jargon here, when you crystallize your pension. No matter what pension pots you've got, at each point it will be tested against the lifetime allowance at that point. So if you take your NHS pension and you're left with 2% of your lifetime allowance left, if you've got other pension pots, you take them, there's only 2% of that protected. The rest of it would potentially face tax charges. So absolutely, it's worth sitting down and having a plan as far as that's concerned. Okay, Alice, could we have the next slide, please? Okay, so I just want to, in terms of wrapping up today's session, which I hope you've all got a lot of value out, can I just quickly run round the panel? Is there anything else you wish to add? Any last bits of gold dust you want to spread?
Not gold dust, but I was going to say not gold dust, but just to apologise, my video wasn't working.
Oh,
sorry about that.
Julia, I haven't started with you on any of these, so
just make some time to review things. Just take some time out and just look at where you are. That's all I can really add. And it's all about, we're talking about early retirement. It does give you that flexibility. Make sure you don't have any gaps though. We can help you with that. We can look at cash flow analysis. We can, give you that confidence to take that step. And that's all about what we do, really. Giving you that knowledge, giving you the numbers for you to look at that and think, yes, that's possible. I can do that with all confidence.
Thank you very much. Chris, any last thoughts from you?
Still a little bit of Anita's actually, she mentioned the teenage year. I mean, hopefully what you can do in retirement is you can, with significantly less of the pressures, if you've got yourself financially secure, you can take your life off down the avenues that have always been at the back of your mind, and enjoy yourself. That's it.
Thank you very much. Anita?
Yeah, I would perhaps consider actually, I declare an interest here as a coach and mentor, but it is actually mentoring is actually quite an opportunity to look at what really matters to you and what plans you might want to make for retirement. And I ought to plug the RCGP mentoring platform, which has been launched in the last year. That's free to members, and just go on the website and explore, and you could be matched up with a mentor to maybe just spend some structured sessions with a mentoring framework to work through some of these issues. I'm not trying to replace financial advisors, but if you're not clear about where your life is going and what you want to do in this phase in the lead up to retirement, that is also another option.
Brilliant, and I think that's absolutely spot on. This isn't for me the whole retirement journey. It's about the money, it's about the career, it's about all of it, and it is very much. You guys are all very, very busy doing a vital job, and it's equally important that you look to yourselves and look to your own well-being, and look to ultimately having that retirement that you want at the end of the day. So a big thank you to Anita, to Chris, to Mark, and to Julia for coming on this evening. I hope you've had lots of value about it. Sorry, about the topic that we've talked about. So Michelle has put a link in, I think, in the chat there for some feedback. There will be an email from Michelle with a short survey to give us feedback and help us shape more of these in the future. What I would ask is that if, as we haven't gone into quite so much of the technical stuff, which we did this time last year, if there is an appetite for you and any other colleagues for a more deep dive into the detail, please let us know. More than happy to provide more of this kind of format for that. There will be a recording of the webinar to follow shortly, and if you haven't already, on the screen is the QR code, which if you stick your phone up to it and press the button, etc., we'll take you through to a no obligation conversation with ourselves and see if we can help you. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much for attending today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to helping you in the future. Many thanks.